Welcome to the deep dive. You send us sources, we dig in and pull out the really core stuff.
Yeah, the goal is to give you that aha moment, without drowning you in details. Quick, insightful knowledge.
Exactly. We know you want to get smart fast.
And that's what we're here for.
So today, we're hitting the trail, literally. We're looking at the Oregon Trail thanks to the source material you sent in on Rinker Buck's book, The Oregon Trail, A New American Journey.
And this is definitely not your standard history lesson. Buck actually went and did it.
He did, the whole trail.
What? Yeah, retraced the 2,100 miles in a covered wagon. So it blends his own sort of modern adventure with deep historical research and honestly some really great personal stories.
Wow. Okay, so our mission here is to get beyond the myth of the Oregon Trail. What was it really like and what's left of it today?
Let's find those surprising bits, the insights you don't usually hear. It's more than just dates and names.
All right, let's dive in. What's the first big takeaway?
Well, the thing that jumps out right away, from Buck's perspective, is that the trail, it's not just history. It's still there, physically.
Right. You'd think, wouldn't you? 150, 200 years later, it'd be paved over, gone.
But no. He makes a huge point that large chunks of that original 2,100-mile route are still traceable. Sometimes they're literally under modern highways.
He mentions things like the Transcontinental Railroad, the Lincoln Highway.
Yeah, and even big parts of the interstate system, like I-80 out in Nebraska and Wyoming. They basically just followed the path of least resistance, the path the wagons had already carved out.
So those ruts are, in a way, still guiding us.
Exactly. It's what Buck calls a living continuum of history. It's not like some historical site that's, preserved under glass.
Embalmed, yeah.
Right. This is woven into the actual functioning landscape we use today. It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It really changes how you might look at a road trip across that part of the country, knowing you're basically following wagon tracks.
Definitely. And Buck, he didn't just read about it. He felt this pull to experience it himself, this dream of crossing the country in a wagon.
Which partly came from his dad, right? His father had done wagon trips before.
Yeah. Apparently his father had this adventurous streak, did some less intense wagon journeys. It sort of planted the idea.
That romantic notion, but then there's the reality check.
Oh, yeah. He talks about that phrase the pioneers used, seeing the elephant.
Seeing the elephant. What did that fully mean?
It was kind of shorthand for the whole massive, overwhelming experience.
Yeah.
The adventure, the potential reward, the new life, but also the sheer danger and hardship. Seeing the elephant meant you'd face the enormity of it all.
The good and the terrifying, basically.
Exactly. And Buck mentions this variation he heard, kind of a grim joke almost. The cowards never started. Only the madmen started.
And he felt like one of the madmen doing it in the 21st century.
He definitely identified with that sentiment, yeah. The sheer audacity of trying it.
Which is so different from how we travel now. Everything planned, GPS, scheduled stops.
Right. Buck contrasts it with his father's trips, which sounded more spontaneous. Just hitch up the team and go figure it out along the way.
Yeah.
Very different from, say, modern RV culture.
That improvisation must have been key for the original pioneers.
Absolutely central. And it's something Buck seemed keen to sort of recapture. Now, speaking of the practicalities, the animals.
Mules.
Ah, yes, the mules. Not what you immediately picture, maybe? You think oxen, horses.
But Buck makes a really strong case that mules were the real MVPs of the Oregon Trail. He argues historians often overlook them, maybe focusing on more prestigious topics.
But the economic impact was huge.
Immense. And it wasn't accidental. American draft mules were specifically bred for this kind of work.
Going way back, even.
Right back to George Washington, actually. He saw the need for strong, reliable draft animals and played a key role in importing larger donkey breeds, like the Andalusian, to crossbreed with mares.
So Washington was basically the father of the American draft mule. In a significant way, yes. He understood you needed something tougher and more resilient than horses for that kind of heavy, long-distance hauling. It shows how vital they were considered from early on.
And it wasn't just brawn, was it? Buck talks about their intelligence.
Yes, their smarts, and, crucially, their self-preservation instinct, that donkey heritage. Unlike a horse, which might just obey an order even if it's dangerous.
A mule thinks twice.
Exactly. Buck says they ponder matters a lot more. He gives the example of crossing a river. A horse might just charge in. A mule wants to check it out. Maybe watch another animal cross first. Make sure it's safe.
Which means you had to handle them differently. You couldn't just boss them around.
You needed patience. Sometimes unhitching them, leaving them across tricky spots individually. It required real understanding between the teamster and the animal.
And this demand for mules fueled a whole economy, right? Back east, in places like Missouri.
Oh, absolutely. A massive flow of capital. Farmers became breeders, outfitters sprang up, banks got involved. It was a fundamental economic engine for westward expansion, all built on these animals.
It adds another layer to the whole migration story. Book even names his own team, right? Makes it personal.
He does. Jake, Beck, and Butte, each with their quirks. Beck was apparently a bit skittish. Butte had some foot issues.
But Jake was the steady one.
Yeah, Jake seems to have been the anchor, the one he really connected with. It grounds the history in that daily personal experience of working with these animals.
Okay, so you've got the mules, this incredible undertaking. But the journey itself, Buck doesn't sugarcoat it. He calls the trail a crucible.
Yeah, and one of the most striking, kind of horrifying details is the sheer volume of stuff people just threw away.
Because they overloaded their wagons at the start.
Exactly. They'd start out packed with furniture, tools, heirlooms, food, and then realize they couldn't make it over the terrain, so they just dumped it.
Creating what Buck called
America's first Superfund sites. Just miles and miles of discarded belongings. It speaks volumes about the desperation, the hard choices they faced.
That image is powerful. Progress leaving this trail of waste. And it wasn't just physical stuff, was it? The trail amplified conflicts, too.
Definitely. Buck sees it as an incubator for problems. Disease spread like wildfire in those close quarters. Religious tensions flared up. Competition for scarce resources like grazing land or water became fierce.
Issues that didn't just disappear when they reached Oregon, either.
No, these conflicts often continued to shape communities and, American society in the West. And the daily reality was just brutal.
The sheer physical labor.
Constant work. The terrain was punishing. He describes these dust storms on O'Fallon's Bluff where you literally couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Crossing rivers like the Platte was always dangerous, unpredictable.
People drowned. Accidents happened.
Tragically, yes. Buck recounts awful stories, like a young boy, Johnny Williams' son, being crushed by a wagon wheel. It just hammers home the constant danger. It wasn't a scenic tour.
No romantic illusions there. So what did push people to undertake something so incredibly difficult and dangerous? Was it one single thing?
Buck argues it often wasn't some, grand manifest destiny vision for every single person. For many, it was more ordinary in a way.
Ordinary? How so?
When it was following established patterns, people had been moving west for generations. It was almost the default option if things weren't working out where you were. Pack up, head west, look for land, for opportunity.
Economic drivers, maybe religious freedom for some groups.
Those were definitely big factors. But sometimes it was just the next step, continuing a known way of life, just further west without maybe a super detailed plan of what Oregon would even be like.
But certain figures did help shape the idea of the trail, right? Made it seem achievable, desirable.
Oh, absolutely. He points to Narcissa Whitman as a key example. Her letters and accounts back east were hugely influential.
How so? What does she represent?
She presented this image of a capable, resilient American woman thriving in the West, riding her horse side saddle across the plains. It challenged existing notions and likely inspired many other women and families to think, hey, maybe we can do this.
She helped popularize it, gave it a human face. Now, fast forward to Buck's own trip. Who does he meet along the trail today?
It's a real mix, not just history enthusiasts. He runs into RV tourists, local landowners.
But also people facing very modern problems.
Yeah, and that's quite poignant. He meets families, grandparents raising grandkids because the parents are struggling with meth addiction or the fallout from economic downturns. It's a stark reminder that hardship persists along these same routes, just in different forms.
Wow. History echoing in the present.
But there's also kindness. He talks about trail magic.
Trail magic.
These unexpected moments of generosity, people offering help, water, a place to stay, especially across Nebraska. Just spontaneous kindness from strangers.
Like maybe the pioneers helped each other out, that spirit carrying on.
That's the feeling he gets, yeah. A sense of community rooted in that shared landscape, perhaps.
And for Buck himself, the journey was deeply personal, wasn't it? He's pretty open about his own struggles.
Very open. He talks about his fears, especially at the start. Was he crazy? Could he actually handle the mules, the wagon, the sheer physical demand?
And the memory of his father is always there.
Constantly. His father's earlier wagon trips become this recurring motif. He explores that bond, the idea of legacy, what he calls the psychic tattoo of paternity. It feels like he's working through his own history as much as the trail's history.
Was his own journey smooth sailing? Apart from the existential stuff?
Oh, definitely not. He had this smaller cart, the trail pup, that seemed determined to break down repeatedly.
Always something.
Always something. And then there was the dynamic with his brother, Nick, who came along. They're clearly very different people.
But the shared experience.
Yeah, it seems like going through all that hardship together forged a much stronger bond between them, despite their differences.
And along the way, he meets people dedicated to keeping the trail's memory alive.
He does. He mentions historical figures like Ezra Meeker, who worked tirelessly in the early 20th century to mark the trail, and modern folks like Bob Brown doing similar preservation work. It highlights this ongoing effort to not let the physical trail or its story disappear.
And he also touches on the Mormon Trail, which overlaps significantly.
Yes, he acknowledges the massive scale and importance of the Mormon migration, another epic story of faith, resilience, and also conflict that unfolded along much of the same route.
So amidst all the difficulty, the dust, the breakdowns, the river crossings, were there moments of beauty, connection?
Absolutely. He describes incredible moments connecting with the landscape, the animals, the history. His perspective clearly shifts. He starts with maybe more a romantic view, then gets a dose of harsh reality and economic understanding.
And ends up with?
A really deep appreciation for the whole experience, the good and the bad. A respect for what the pioneers endured and achieved.
So they finally make it to Oregon. What's that like?
It's the end of the line. He describes the state of the mules, clearly exhausted but having made it. You feel the weight of that accomplishment.
And he has to part with the mules.
Yeah. The decision to sell the team, Jake, Beck, and Butte, is clearly emotional. It marks the real end of that intense partnership, that shared journey.
A tough farewell.
Very. And then he reflects on it all, the transformation, the lessons learned. He ties that pioneer spirit, the spontaneity, the resilience, back to something fundamental in the American character.
While also giving credit to everyone who helped him along his own modern journey.
Definitely. He's very grateful for all the trail magic and support he received.
Okay, so wrapping up our own deep dive here, based on Buck's journey, what are the big takeaways for listeners?
Well, first, the trail is still with us, physically shaping the land. Second, the pioneer reality was incredibly harsh, far from just a romantic adventure. Third, don't forget the mules. They were crucial.
Right. And the human stories then and now. Perseverance, adaptation, those surprising connections.
Exactly. It's about resilience, past and present.
So here's something to chew on. Buck went chasing this historical elephant. It makes you think, what's that fundamental human need to explore, to push boundaries?
Good question.
The Oregon Trail was one path. What are the trails we navigate today? Maybe not covered wagons, but metaphorical trails, career paths, personal challenges.
What elephants are we chasing in our own lives, maybe?
Yeah.
And what are the unexpected realities, the breakdowns and the trail magic we might find along the way?
Yeah, something to think about. What are your deep dives revealing?
It definitely encourages you to reflect on Buck's stories, see what resonates, maybe even dig a little deeper into that whole era and its legacy yourself.